3 days, 20 experts, hundreds of thousands of dollars in consulting fees, and a $120 million contract teetering on the edge of collapse. Inside the top-floor boardroom of Harrison Robotics, the air was as heavy as the fog over San Francisco Bay. Error charts bled red, and tangled lines of code flickered across a massive LED screen like a stubborn storm that refused to clear. Just when everyone seemed ready to accept defeat, the door eased open. A man in a faded gray uniform stepped in, a mop in his left hand, one earbud dangling from his ear. He glanced up at the whiteboard, narrowing his eyes, as if he'd just spotted something no one else could see. This was Daniel Hayes, the night shift janitor of the building, and in the next few minutes, he would do what 20 experts could not: turn the entire situation around with nothing but a marker and a few strokes. What he didn't know was that, at the far end of the hallway, Olivia Harrison, the coldest CEO in Silicon Valley, had been standing there all along, watching his every move. And what she was about to do next, it would change both their stories forever. The sound of heels clicked steadily against the polished wooden floor, cutting through the tense murmurs of engineers struggling to find a solution. Olivia Harrison, 42, stood at the head of a long conference table cluttered with laptops, papers, and cups of cold coffee. Her black hair was pinned in a tight bun, her charcoal gray suit tailored to precision, and her eyes sharp as blades swept across every face. "We've spent 3 days, held 6 emergency meetings, and burned through $500,000 in consulting fees. And what do we have now? A mess." Her voice was as cold as the morning wind over the Golden Gate Bridge. No one spoke. Sweat-dotted foreheads. Some stared down at their screens, avoiding her gaze. On the massive LED board, error charts glowed crimson, and lines of chaotic code flickered like a portrait of failure. Olivia took a breath, stepped toward the door. 5 minutes. I want a solution, not another apology. The door closed softly behind her, leaving the bitter smell of burnt coffee and the crushing weight of pressure. Out in the hallway, Daniel Hayes bent down to pick up a soda can that had rolled out of an overfilled trash bin. His faded gray uniform, worn-out shoes, and one dangling earbud made him look like any other night janitor. But his eyes weren't on the trash. They were locked on the whiteboard inside the conference room, where a tangle of equations waited like a riddle begging to be solved. Daniel, 36, night janitor at Harrison Robotics. Few knew he had once been a top AI student at Stanford University, first in his class, until life handed him a far harder test: the sudden death of his young wife and raising their 3-year-old daughter, Emily, alone. When the lights in the conference room still burned, but the engineers had left in silence, Daniel stepped inside. He set his mop in the corner and walked up to the board. The equations sprawled across it like a battlefield, twisted logic loops and distorted data sets. He raised his cleaning rag, then stopped. "Wait," he murmured. It wasn't textbook logic, it was instinct. Something was wrong at the very foundation of the model. He picked up a red marker, sketched a sigmoid curve, circled 2 swapped variables, and underlined a misweighted node. Then he stepped back, arms crossed, and nodded. "They've been looking at this backwards." A woman's voice came from behind him, calm, but laced with steel. "And you think you've got it, right?" Daniel turned. Olivia Harrison stood in the doorway, her gaze cold but studying him closely. "I wasn't trying to mess with anything," Daniel said quickly. "Just saw something off." Olivia stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the red marks. Without another word, she pulled a tablet from her pocket, entered the adjustments exactly as Daniel had drawn them. 8 seconds passed. Accuracy up 18.4%. Error reduction over 60%, she said flatly. For the first time, her eyes lingered on him. Daniel Hayes. Position: night janitor. Education: Stanford, left in junior year. Status: widower, single father to a 6-year-old daughter. Do you understand what you've just done? Daniel shrugged lightly. I wasn't trying to step on anyone's toes. Just figured, if the bathtub's clogged, don't pour in more hot water. Try unclogging the drain first. The corner of Olivia's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but warmer than ice. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., Conference Room C. You'll be on the observer list. I don't need to. This isn't a suggestion, Mr. Hayes. It's an instruction. Daniel opened his mouth to mention Emily, but Olivia was already turning away. Before disappearing through the door, she added, Give your daughter one more reason to be proud of her father. He stood there, frozen for a moment. He looked at the red scribbles on the board, then at the mop in the corner, and let out a small chuckle. Guess you're getting a raise, old friend. At 10 minutes to 8 the next morning, Daniel Hayes stood outside Conference Room C at Harrison Robotics, wearing the cleanest button-down shirt he owned, still with a faint coffee stain at the hem. His worn leather satchel hung from one shoulder. Inside it, a notebook, a mechanical pencil, and a carefully folded piece of paper. Emily's drawing of a man holding a mop in one hand and a lightning bolt in the other. Inside, the air felt heavy, like the moments before a storm. Engineers, project managers, and data analysts clustered around the oval table, the main screen filled with diagrams, charts, and updated timelines. When Olivia Harrison walked in, everyone straightened instantly, their conversation snapping to silence. Sunlight from the large windows lit her calm but commanding face. She glanced around once, then pointed to an empty chair near the edge of the table. That's your seat. Daniel didn't question it. He just nodded and sat, his plain work shirt looking out of place against the sea of tailored blazers. Olivia began, her voice crisp and deliberate. Yesterday, we witnessed a miscalculation that nearly cost us a multi-phase contract and exposed fundamental weaknesses in our predictive loop. But she tapped a button on her tablet. On the screen appeared Daniel's red marker corrections. Last night, someone gave us a gift. This adjustment reduced our training error by over 60%, cut latency by 22 milliseconds, and made it painfully clear that expertise can look very different from what we expect. A low murmur rippled through the room. Eyes flicked toward Daniel, then quickly away. A hand went up. Mark Benson, senior systems engineer with an MBA from Harvard, wore an expression of polite skepticism. With all due respect, how do we know this isn't just a fluke? Run the model, Olivia replied. Mark hesitated, then keyed in the new parameters. Within seconds, the simulation ran smoothly. No overfitting. Predictive behavior aligned across multiple datasets. The green performance bar glowed. Still could be luck, Mark muttered. Daniel finally spoke, his voice steady but edged with quiet conviction. But if it is luck, then I hope we're smart enough to learn from luck when it walks into the room with a mop. A few quiet chuckles rose around the table. Olivia didn't smile, but she gave the smallest of nods, the kind that acknowledged an unexpected yet valid point. When the meeting ended, Daniel left with every intention of going back to his regular shift. But just before the elevator doors closed, Olivia appeared, holding 2 takeaway coffee cups. You held your own in there, she said, handing him one. I wasn't trying to. Maybe that's why it worked. That bathtub analogy yesterday, that wasn't just a throwaway line, was it? Number. That's how I operate. I fix things I've had to, and I talk to my daughter like she's 6, not 60. So, I explain tech in terms of plumbing, baking, or car repairs. It sticks better that way. Olivia studied him for a moment. Interesting. Useful. Daniel glanced at her. And you always talk like you're managing a courtroom instead of having a conversation? Maybe. I manage what I can control, even conversations. Then, I'm probably your worst nightmare. The corner of her mouth lifted faintly. Possibly, but yesterday you solved one of mine. They stepped out of the elevator together. Neither spoke further, but the silence between them was no longer sharp. It was space held open, deliberately. In the week following that first meeting, Daniel Hayes's name appeared on more work schedules and internal emails than in all his years on the night shift combined. No longer the guy who mops the floors, he was now listed as an observer for high-level technical meetings, even included in group chats once reserved for engineers and managers. But along with that attention came subtle, heavy changes. Morning smiles became curt nods. Casual questions turned into silence. A few still spoke to him, but with a faint wariness, as if afraid of being associated. In the elevator, Daniel caught fragments of muttered words. Shortcut, lucky break, followed by soft chuckles behind his back. On Thursday morning, during a progress review for algorithm optimization, Mark Benson spoke in a tone that was measured but edged with something sharper. We're leaning on adjustments that have never been tested at scale. I'm not sure Harrison Robotics' clients will be thrilled to learn that the person who made them never finished college. The room went still. A few glances slid toward Olivia, waiting for her response. Daniel sat quietly, twirling a pencil between his fingers, his gaze fixed on the data board. Olivia looked up, her voice low but cutting through the air. Clients care about results, and the results are speaking for themselves. Mark tilted his head slightly, pressing his lips together, but said nothing more. The meeting carried on, colder than before. Later that afternoon, Daniel was changing mop water in the lobby, when Olivia appeared in his line of sight. This time, she wasn't in her usual armor of a business suit, but in a long camel coat, carrying a slim folder. Are you busy tonight? Daniel paused, setting the bucket down. I guess I'm free. There's a place in North Beach, somewhere I go when I need to think. It's quiet. No whiteboards, no charts. Come with me. He looked her straight in the eye. Is that an invitation or an order? You can take it however you want. North Beach at night carried the scent of ocean air mingled with roasted garlic drifting from the Italian restaurants lining the street. The place Olivia chose sat on a corner, its warm golden light spilling through frosted glass. Inside, mismatched wooden tables and worn leather chairs filled the room. Small oil paintings hung between wine racks. From behind the bar, an old radio played Chet Baker's Mellow Trumpet. Olivia was already seated at a table by the window, her back lightly against the wall. Her hair was down, soft waves resting on a pale gray sweater. For the first time, Daniel saw an Olivia without her armor. You look different without the mop, she said, the corner of her mouth lifting. And you look different without the whole company on your shoulders, he replied, pulling out the chair opposite hers. They sat in a silence that was almost comfortable, broken only by the clink of silverware and low laughter from a nearby table. The waiter brought garlic-buttered bread and glasses of deep red wine. Olivia was the one to break the quiet. Do you know the real reason I ask you here? Daniel tilted his head, half teasing. You like watching a guy out of his depth wrestle with a wine list? She smiled faintly, shaking her head. Because I realized it's been 3 years since I've had a real conversation. Not a report, a negotiation, or a signing. I mean the kind where someone actually asks, "How was your day?" and wants to hear the answer. Daniel leaned in slightly. Sounds like you need a new schedule. Or a therapist. Tried that. He quit after the second session. Said I made him anxious. Daniel laughed. A full, unfiltered laugh that made two diners glance over. Olivia looked at him, surprised for a moment, then returned a genuine smile. There, Daniel nodded. The human part of the iceberg. You always talk like this? Only when I forget where I'm sitting. Dinner moved along with scattered stories that somehow pulled two distant lives closer. Childhood in San Jose. Emily's uncanny ability to win any argument. A battered college book Daniel still kept. The movie Olivia had walked out of because she couldn't stand the ending. When Daniel spoke of cold winter mornings scented with cinnamon that brought back his wife's voice, Olivia stayed silent. She answered with a story about her mother, a woman who taught her that emotion is a luxury in a suit. Outside, a light fog was slipping through the streets. When they left the restaurant, the ocean breeze was sharp, but their steps slowed, as if neither wanted the night to end. At the corner where they parted, Olivia said, "Tomorrow, I want you in a more important meeting. Be ready. And don't be surprised if some people aren't happy you're there." Daniel simply nodded. But as she walked away, he knew one thing for certain. This was no longer just a CEO and janitor dynamic. Something between them was shifting. The next day, a thin veil of fog hung over San Francisco like a white curtain. Harrison Robotics was already lit from early morning, the blue glow of server screens pulsing like the steady heartbeat of a giant machine. Daniel Hayes stepped out of the elevator onto the 21st floor, where the strategic conference room was located. Unlike his first day, today he wore a brand new light blue shirt, the collar still bearing faint store creases. In his pocket, the small, lucky stone Emily had given him remained in place. The moment he entered the room, he felt the difference. A long oval glass table stretched nearly the length of the space, a massive LED wall displaying a global map of AI projects. Around it sat the most powerful figures in the company: product heads, lead engineers, the CFO, and even board representatives. The low murmur of conversation ceased as Olivia walked in. She didn't sit immediately, but gestured toward an empty chair near the end of the table. "That's your seat." Mark Benson raised an eyebrow, his displeasure barely hidden as Daniel sat down. Olivia opened the meeting. "We're here because the neural lag issue, the latency in our machine learning loop, still hasn't been fully resolved. So far, no one's found a viable solution." A new slide appeared on the screen, showing Daniel's revised model. Olivia continued, "This is the optimized version," Hayes proposed. Mark folded his arms, speaking in a detached tone. "We've reviewed it. The logic is sound, but we won't be implementing it." Olivia tilted her head. "Reason? It's untested at scale, no precedent. And," his gaze slid toward Daniel, "we're talking about code written by someone without an engineering degree, someone who's never run a production deployment." The air cooled. A few reluctant nods went around the table. Daniel sat still for a few seconds before speaking, his voice steady. Not loud, but carrying clearly. "I get it. I'm not the person you expected. And maybe that makes people uncomfortable. But if the numbers are right, if the system runs better, then what's the real question here? Who fixed it? Or that it's fixed?" He paused, locking eyes with Mark. "If I were wearing a $1,000 suit with a Stanford diploma, you'd call this innovation. But because I wear a janitor's uniform with my daughter's sticker on my laptop, it's a risk. If a person's worth is measured only by the cost of the mistakes they might make, maybe it's time we measure worth differently. Silence gripped the room. Olivia's gaze stayed fixed on him. Then she said, decisively, "Roll out the update." Mark clenched his jaw but didn't argue. That afternoon, Daniel found Olivia on the rooftop balcony, overlooking the Bay Bridge. She stood with her arms crossed, her coat draped over the railing, the wind catching loose strands of her hair. "The meeting earlier got tense," he said, stepping beside her. "They're used to the predictable." "You're not," Olivia replied, still looking at the horizon. "So, why stick your neck out for me?" She turned toward him, her eyes softer for the first time that day. "Because you remind me of something I used to believe in before I traded it for board seats and slide decks." "What's that?" "That talent doesn't need permission to exist." Daniel gave a faint smile. "Nice idea. Dangerous in the wrong hands." "So is silence." The wind picked up, carrying the briny scent of the bay between them. Neither spoke again, but there was no mistaking it. The thread between them had just pulled tighter. 3 days later, the Harrison Robotics building was lit long before sunrise. The atmosphere was unlike any ordinary day. People moved faster, spoke in lower tones, and the constant clatter of keyboards echoed like a drumbeat before battle. Today, the company would present its upgraded AI system to a strategic client group from Seattle, the kind of audience whose signature could secure a multi-million-dollar contract, or whose doubt could deal a devastating blow. Daniel arrived early at the 18th floor conference hall. The room was vast, with high ceilings and cold white lights glinting off the long glass table. A massive LED wall dominated the front, displaying the AI interface charts, metrics, and pulsing status bars. He took his place at the technical station in the back, headset on, eyes scanning the laptop screen. His heartbeat was fast, but his hands remained steady. In his shirt pocket, the small lucky stone from Emily sat like a quiet reminder of how far he'd come. Olivia stepped onto the stage, dressed in a minimalist black suit, no jewelry except a slim watch at her wrist. Her voice rang clear through the mic. "Thank you for being here. Today, we want to show you a new level of learning speed and responsiveness in our system." At first, everything went smoothly. The algorithms responded instantly. The simulations ran without a hitch. Clients nodded. A few exchanged murmured comments. Then, like a scratch marring a perfect record, latency appeared. The neural lag indicator shifted from green to yellow, flickering dangerously close to red. The 3D model on the main display slowed, frames skipping slightly. A ripple of whispers moved through the front rows. From the very first row, Mark Benson leaned toward Olivia, his voice pitched just loud enough for others to hear. "I warned you, we shouldn't be trying this today." Olivia didn't respond, but her eyes for just a fraction of a second flicked toward Daniel. In his headset, a technician's urgent voice came through. "Could be a buffer overflow. Restart will take at least 3 minutes." 3 minutes here might as well be a lifetime. Daniel could feel the weight of every gaze, even from those pretending not to look. Part of him wanted to let the safe option happen, wait it out, let someone else take the fall. But then came the flash of Emily's face in his mind, the nights mopping floors with soaked shoes, the years of being sidelined for not having the right credentials. He bent over the keyboard, fingers moving in a rapid, practiced rhythm. He pulled up the optimization module he'd written and began adjusting the live system. Something few in this building would dare attempt mid-demo. Sweat dotted his forehead, but each keystroke landed with precise intent. On the LED display, the performance bar shifted. Yellow, pale, green, deep green. Latency dropped below even the pre-incident level. The 3D model resumed spinning as smoothly as if nothing had happened. The whispers died out. Olivia kept speaking, never letting her cadence falter, as though this recovery was part of the plan all along. When the demo ended, the clients rose to their feet in applause. The Seattle representative stepped forward and shook Olivia's hand firmly. Impressive. This is why we chose Harrison Robotics. At the back, Daniel removed his headset, his shoulders lowering in relief. He caught Mark Benson's eye. No smirk. No dismissal this time. Only the faintest nod of reluctant respect. That night, long after most of the staff had gone, Daniel found himself on the rooftop. The city stretched out below, a patchwork of lights veiled in thin mist. The Golden Gate Bridge glowed in the darkness, its reflection rippling in the black water. Olivia stepped out through the glass door, carrying 2 paper coffee cups. "You just saved a major contract," she said, setting one beside him. "It wasn't me." "It was the whole team," Daniel replied, eyes still on the skyline. "You're being too modest." She paused, then added, "I spoke to the board. You're no longer just a janitor. I want you on the core development team." Daniel turned to her, surprise flickering across his face. "You sure? Some people won't be happy." "I'm sure. And I've learned not everyone has to be happy." They stood in silence for a moment, the wind carrying the faint sound of waves from the bay. Olivia extended her hand. "Welcome to a new chapter." Daniel took it. This time, his smile held no hesitation, only the quiet confidence of someone who had just stepped through a door that would never close again. Somewhere far away, Emily was asleep, blissfully unaware that by the time her father woke up tomorrow, his life would be forever changed. Sometimes, the people we overlook are the ones who hold the answers we've been chasing all along. And sometimes, the smallest act of trust can turn into the biggest leap forward. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales from Behind the Tale. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell and heartily so you never miss the next one. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. We'd love to hear your story.